I'm going to ask some very specific questions now. First, to the biography writers. Tell us how you choose which people you're going to write about, and how do you suggest, this is two-part, how do you choose who you write about, and how do you suggest teachers get kids interested in reading about people they have never heard of?
Well, some of it, usually I'm looking for a connection myself with the person that I'm going to write about. So it could be like my most recent book, Swimming with Sharks. I wrote about sharks because I grew up terrified of sharks. And so I thought it would be really meaningful to write a book about them and to write a book about a woman scientist who spent her whole life researching sharks. So I always look in the person that I write about, there has to be some kind of meaningful connection for me. And I do think about my readers, and I think about, I'd like it to be something that I think a lot of readers would also be interested in reading about. A lot of teachers embrace books about lesser known people, I have found. And it's more about finding the why. Why would you like to read this book? And so I think, obviously, kids know who Eleanor Roosevelt is, and so that's an easy pick. But I think that I've seen that a lot of teachers now are saying, oh, this is a book about, a scientist, if they've got a kid who's interested in science, or this is a book about something more broad, like overcoming your fear of something. And I think that I see that a lot of kids are very open to reading books about lesser-known women.
Yeah, I'll go backwards with that question because I think that's sometimes where I do find the difficulty with publishers, like, oh, we haven't heard of this person, so that is hard sometimes, and you do have to convince them there's another layer. It's not just the name, but it's the subject that you wrote about. And like Heather, too, we spend a long time on these books, so it's going to be somebody we love. I can't imagine doing a anti-heroine, for instance. Stone Mirrors I worked on for 15 years, and Finding Wonders a few years. And I still love Edmonia Lewis, and I still go see her art, and I still, for home my life, I'll feel connected to her. And I think with Finding Wonders, there were 3 scientists, and I was looking for somebody who looked at the sky, somebody who studied rocks, somebody who did plants and growing things. And I was also looking for a thematic connection, and one was to bring in the boys. All these girls had fathers who supported them, and I had written a book about mothers and daughters, and was really happy to show the fathers influenced them. Maria Marian's father was a painter, and it was against the law in Germany in the 1700s for a woman to paint, but a woman could honor her father. So she helped with the painting and learned to paint. And Mary Anning helped her father find fossils on the beach, and Maria Mitchell, there were 10 children in their family in Nantucket. But she was the one who would stay up all night on the roof with her father and learn astronomy. So they had a connection. I think the choosing is to find something, again, that just resonates with me and sticks with me.
Okay, for everyone, did you read any book or books as a child that made you think for the first time that you, as a girl, as a woman, could do anything that you wanted? Did any books inspire you that way?
Well, I did love Little Women. And I did want to be Jo, but my big sister always took that, so I got to be Amy the painter. But, I think the variety of choices within that novel inspired me.
I kind of lived in my head. I had this big imagination, so I always kind of cast myself in a whole lot of things. But one of the books that I loved, librarian gave it to me because she saw I was reading the same books over and over and over again, and she went out of her way to order this book. It was 31 Brothers and Sisters by Reba Paith Mirsky, and it was written in the late 50s about this Zulu girl, and her father was the chief, and she had 31 brothers and sisters, and she wanted to go on the hunt with the men, and but her brother was a poet, and he, didn't really want to go, but he's the chief's son. And boy, did I not relate. My brother was a mathematician and scientist, didn't want to put on those football pads, but who was ready to burst through the line as a running back? Russell, I'll pay you a quarter if I can wear if I could suit up and just get into formation. Oh, I'll do it for free. Go ahead. Get out there on that field. And my father was a coach, and he looked. Not even my daughter is on the field. Get that girl off the field. Man, what gave me away? I don't know. But it was that kind of story. It was the Reba Payne-Mursky story that really, said, here's this girl, she's going on the hunt, and I believe she actually kills either the leopard or the tiger or something. So, yeah.
Anyone else?
I'm just trying desperately to think if when I was little I ever thought I could do anything. I think I must have. I had a very good imagination. But mostly, I'd love The Secret Garden, but she was a whiny kid like me. So, let's see.
I think when I was young, I really wasn't very brave. And I don't remember really, I remember loving Nancy Drew. She was so smart and resourceful. And so I did sort of think like maybe I could be a detective like her, or Harriet the Spy or something. But I don't think I ever read a book where I thought I could do anything I want. I don't think I ever did read a book about a woman that made me feel that way.
Not even Pippi?
So Pippi's pretty good, yeah.
So you've all written about girls and women, some nonfiction, some fiction. How have you been changed by some of the people that you either learned about or created?
Well, I would just say, first of all, I think all of these authors are fantastic. I'm so glad that they're in the world writing these stories that I then get to read and interpret with bits of color and paper and texture. What I'm finding from being a part of this industry is that my knowledge is going very deep about the beginnings of some of these women that I admire, who I thought that I knew about, like Fannie Lou Hamer, and I just knew the surface of her life. But reading the manuscript and researching, because I always do my own research, I read the manuscript and then I go back and read the same books probably that the author read, and just finding out how did they become heroic. In the case of Fannie Lou Hamer, she's in a sharecropping family. She works from early in the morning to late at night. She goes to bed hungry. What is it about her that makes her rise to become this voice for the civil rights movement, both in song and in word? What is it about her beginnings that allows her to take a room full of dejected people who just want to go home and make them stay one more day to fight? And what I'm finding is that this early family connection, it might be a grandfather or a grandmother who takes a certain kind of time or teaches a particular thing. It could be knitting or something, but a connection with a caring adult early on. I'm seeing that over and over again in these stories. And so it makes me very aware of the power that we have in the world to reach out to a child, to pay attention to them, to really look at them and really see them and really talk to them. And it doesn't matter whether we're a librarian or a teacher or a parent, it doesn't matter who we are, but we can see our children and relate to them, and we don't know where that's gonna lead. So I'm just grateful that Candlewick found me. Fannie Lou Hamer was my first book, and I just learned so much from the work that you guys do, so I thank you for that.
Would you mind telling us how Candlewick found you?
Okay. So this is, there was a woman, Liz, what was her title? Art Resource Coordinator. Somehow found me, I believe she told me the first time on the internet. And I always say, you know, finding someone on the internet is like finding a needle in a haystack. Right. Like, what did you put in the search engine that you ended up at my doorstep? But she did, and she contacted me, and at the time I was having a show in a place called JP Licks. Anybody from Jamaica Plain? Okay, so you know they have great ice cream, but they also have a great love of the arts, and they do these rotating art shows. So she went to the show. She sent me an email asking me was I interested in maybe illustrating a children's book. Now, go all the way back to when I was a kid. My aunt was a librarian. And so we went to the library on a regular basis, and probably the reason I can't remember any pivotal book is because we read all the time. Right. But my interest was always in that artwork, always looking at those pictures, and can I draw that, and how did they do that? And so my cousin and I, and she's an author, I'm an illustrator, but it goes back very far in our lives. So when she asked me that, I thought, yeah, maybe. So a couple of months down the road, she contacts me again and says, we have a manuscript that we'd like you to look at, and it's about Fannie Lou Hamer. So my ears perked up. I knew a little bit about Fannie Lou Hamer. I knew about the I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know, and I had felt that way many times in life. I knew that she had a rich spiritual voice, and that's something that I also relate to is how spirituals can save us, how music can save us. So I read the manuscript, and wow, it was like, I've got to do this book. And the pivotal thing about the manuscript was that she grew up in a place called Sunflower County. In the midst of all of that, she's in this place called Sunflower County. Sunflowers are beautiful and yellow and all of this, but she's a sharecropper's daughter. So I decided to try it, and Kendall Wick was there every step of the way, encouraging me, treating me as if I knew what I was doing, which I really didn't. And I was surprised that they weren't saying, okay, we want you to put a little girl doing this, doing that, doing this. And they were just like, no, what do you think? And I was like, what do I think? What do I know? But anyway, we got through it, and the book got printed. Yeah, it got printed and did okay.
And a few people noticed it.
Few people.
Thank you for sharing that story. So before I asked her about that, we were talking about whether any of the girls or women that you wrote about, have they changed you at all? Does anybody else want to address that?
I will, because all of the women I have written about have changed me significantly, really. As I said before, I don't think I was very brave when I was younger, and that's one of the reasons I love writing about these trailblazing women. They have really, taught me so much about being brave and putting myself out there, overcoming obstacles myself, and persevering. And my whole writing journey fits into that. But each one teaches me something a little different. So Alice Coachman, who's the first Black woman to win an Olympic gold medal, she taught me about guts and determination. Lucille Mulhall, the original cowgirl, she taught me to be true to myself and not to worry too much about what other people think. Ruth Law, early woman aviator, taught me to steer my own course and that I must have faith in myself. And then Eugenie Clark, she taught me to be open-minded and not to judge others based on rumors or appearance, and something, of course, I knew, but it reminded me the importance of that. So,
when I was trying to learn how to write, I would try to read advice, and they would say, write about what you know, and I thought, well, I'd never write because I don't know anything. So, and then I realized what I did was write to find out. And because I'm going to write a book about something I don't know anything about, and then I learn a great deal about it. And I'm just trying to think, because so many of my characters are so much me, and therefore I can see their imperfections so completely. I'm not sure what they have taught me about myself, except that I'm jealous and that I'm negative things I just do not know about myself. And doing, especially when you do historical fiction, you just learn so much about the world in which girls would go to the factory to work, or people would have to go on strike just because they were starving. Or I've just written this book about a girl who, at 13 years of age, leaves her comfortable home in Havana and goes to the mountains where there's no electricity and no running water. You go to the river to bring the water back, and she goes as a volunteer to teach the campesinos how to read and write. And the courage of those children, and this actually happened in 1961 in Cuba, is just astounding to me. You wouldn't catch me doing that at 13. But a whole generation of women has grown up in Cuba who have become the leading females of Cuba because they went through that experience. And the quotation, which actually comes from the mouth of one of these women, is that the campesinos I taught them how to read and write, and they taught me how to be a person. And I think that's what we learn, isn't it? When we go into a different life, we learn how to be more human, to be more of a person. And I think writing about people, unlike myself, has taught me a lot about how to be a person.
I'm going to follow that up with a question to the two fiction writers. So pay attention. Both of you have written books with boys as main characters. And I wonder if you if it's any different for you when you're writing about a boy as a main character or as a girl as a main character. How do you choose? Is it just the person comes to you and says, here I am, and tell my story? Or have you ever thought of, gee, should I make this a boy or a girl? I just wonder how that works.
I wish I could say that that I choose in that way. In the case of One Crazy Summer, I knew that I wanted to talk about the 1960s, particularly the Black Panther movement, through girls, even though I wouldn't get to the women's side, the true nuts, bolts, and guts of the women's side of that movement. So I already knew that that was going to be very much a woman-driven story, even though that movement is a very machismo, macho kind of movement. So I wanted to flip that. But even before I got there, I knew I was going to do it from a female point of view. The book that I just finished doing, Clayton Bird Goes Underground, is a story about a boy, and that one I said specifically, it is now time for me to step away from the female voice and being, and just get into my inner boy. I was raised, I feel in so many ways I was raised as a little boy from a particular time of my age because I was in tremendous competition with my older brother. I wanted to be as strong as he was, as fast, as smart. We both, I was into the space race because he was into it. I was into science because he was, whatever he did, I had to do it too. So that kind of just trying to like be in his world all the time and all of that I guess I am able to take that with me into some of the works that I've done from the male point of view, but I really wanted to do a story from a boy's point of view because I wanted to not fall back on things that I think, and language that I think it is emotional language that is easily accessible to me. Since I wanted to talk about a boy who did not have access to his emotions, but felt very angry and very ambivalent, and so I think a lot of, being around my brother and being around kind of male frustration, that kind of really helped me a lot. So that was all very, very deliberate, and not so much that I want to say, oh, I am writing a boy book, but I am writing a book about this boy and how he processes. And I was very deliberately coming at it from a point of view where I really felt like I need to get away from the female being just for my own sanity, just for a little while, and come back to my inner boy. So.
Catherine?
Well, I guess I've written more books with girl characters, but I've written a number with boy characters, and I have an imagination. I was never a boy, but I don't know why men can write great books about women, but girls can't write, or women can't write great books about boys and men. But actually, I think I have as many boys and men who love Bridget Terabithia as I have girls who love it, and the central character is a boy in that. In fact, one of the first reviews was this would be a much stronger book if it weren't in the first person, and I thought, it's not in the first person. But I've realized I'm very much inside Jesse Aaron's head in that book. And, I don't snoop around to get boys' conversation, it's in my imagination, right, Rita?
Okay, Acor, I have a question just for you. I am wondering how much, if any, your familiarity with the characters you were illustrating influenced how you painted them. In other words, you were probably a fan of Fannie Lou Hamer, as you've just said, but maybe you did not know all of the poets in the book out of wonder. Maybe you did. Okay. Were you more inspired when you were illustrating the characters you already cared about?
Not necessarily, because as Catherine, you were saying about having an imagination, it's also an essential ingredient in illustrating something, because basically there's a blank page there, and you need to put something on it that speaks, that is related to the text or complements the text and tells a story. So for the poetry book, it was exciting because it was basically 20 different stories. Even though they were on one page, they were encapsulated in one spread, they were still 20 different stories. So trying to put on the personality of the different poets, their time that they're living in, what type of poetry they're doing, and say all of that, but not with a sledgehammer, not sort of beating you over the head, but leaving something that has room for you to add your imagination to my imagination. So I always want the viewer to have space to dream beyond what's on the page. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful.
Okay. And with Fannie Lou Hamer, it was like growing up with her, starting with her at 5 or 6 years old, and then growing with her through this story. And there's a particular point where she talks about picking her first bag of cotton at 6 years old. And I read the manuscript a lot of times, but once when I read it, I thought about my granddaughter, who was about 6 years old when I signed that contract. And I imagined her doing what Fannie Lou Hamer was doing at 6. And that story just clicked in for me, how important it was for us to know that story and to make sure that no other child grows up like that. It just became so real when I thought about my granddaughter. So I think I look for in the manuscript, I look for myself in there. I guess we all have ways of connecting with a story, but I look for myself in these stories, whether it's the child in the story, the adult in the story, the love that someone's experiencing in the story, or the fear or the pain. I try to find something that I can relate to in the story to work from.
There's a bibliography that goes along with this evening, and some of the titles on the bibliography were suggested by the panel. So you'll get to see some of their favorites as well as mine. But I wondered if you wanted to mention any other favorite heroine books that you haven't written that may or may not be on the bibliography, books that you want to make sure that these people know about, that they're sharing with the children that they work with or have in their very own homes. Any titles come to mind?
Oh yes. Oh, there's so many. But I am a fan of. I'm going to mangle the name. It's called I Am Najud, I believe, and 10 and Divorced. Very, very straightforward, just stark story, but so beautifully told and so heroically told.
I hope everybody's read El Defoe. That's the bravest little rabbit in the world. And of course, it really is Cece Bell telling that story, who is herself profoundly deaf. But I just want everybody in the world to read that book and know what it feels like not to be able to hear what's going on and why, since I'm getting more deaf in my old age, people will start on this wonderful story, and as soon as they get to the punchline, the voice goes down like this, and you can't hear the joke. Then everybody's laughing, and you don't know what to do. And you really get that in that story. It's so wonderful. And of course, she decides that she has this superwoman alter ego who is El Defoe, who can, because the teacher wears the big microphone to the bathroom, and so she can hear the teacher going to the bathroom. She can hear the chatter in the teacher's lounge, and so she does have secret powers. It's a wonderful, wonderful book.
Any other titles you want to recommend which are either on the bibliography or not? And none of these people's books are on the bibliography. That does not mean that we don't recommend them, okay? I just want to make sure you understand. These are other books. Did you want to say anything, Heather?
But there's just so many great picture book biographies coming out now about brave women in different areas. I mean, any topic you can imagine, there's something new coming out. I mean, there's still a long way to go to fill in the holes that were left, but some of my favorites, let me think, like in the nature conservation area, The Watcher, which is about Jane Goodall.
You put Me, Jane on, not that one, but they're
Me,
both good.
Jane, yeah, that's another one. Rachel Carson, there's a new book about Rachel Carson, which is great. Sylvia Earle, I'm trying to remember the title, something in the ocean, I can't remember, but that's another good one. Life in the Ocean, thank you. There are some great sports books, which are always favorites of mine. And there's always the old, like Wilma Unlimited, which is one of my
I put that one
all-time
on. Yeah,
favorites.
I
I
love
love that book. The New Kid on Diamond Street is another one. Baseball. Audrey Vernick, I think, maybe wrote that one.
Probably. She's a big baseball
Yeah.
person.
Shayna Corey has some great books about women, strong women. Have You Forgot Your Skirt? Amelia Bloomer, I think, was one of the old ones. And Players in Pigtails. Tanya Lee Stone, who says women can't be doctors, is one of my favorites. I love that book. So, I mean, I could go on and on. I'm not going to take up any more time.
There really is a huge number of good female biographies now, and they're coming out all the time, and one's better than the next. No, the next is better than the one. We don't know, but a lot of them are really good. Okay, so this is slightly off topic, but I thought that I would ask you this. Do you tend to read more adult books by women authors than by men, or not? What about the characters? Are you more likely to pick up a book with a woman on the cover?
I tend to read more books by women authors. I grew up during a time where everything assigned was a male author. So I remember that as soon as I finished school, I got out of school, I just got myself like a stack of books. I made my own my own syllabus. Finally, I can read what I want to read, and so it had like Sylvia Plath and every Toni Morrison and Ntozake Shange and Susan Sontag and I was a big Ayn Rand fan way back in the day, and all of that. So
We don't hold it
it was
against
just
you.
all kinds of woman up thought book that I could get my hands on, and then from there I had to digest all the poetry and all of that. But I kind of really just pushed the men to the side because, see, once something is put on you, it takes something away in the terms of choice. I had to kind of find my way back to the men, but yeah, but yeah, I tend, but even now I tend to read predominantly from female authors.